What's the haps? I'm Meroka, and I'm here today to give you my professional gaming opinion on Far Changing Tides. Changing Tides is the sort of sequel to 2018's indie hit Far Lone Sails. I say sort of sequel. They describe it as a companion title, which is weird, but I guess kind of fair. There's no significant requirement to have played the first, but they do impact each other narratively, though I'll pick that apart later because it might get a touch spoilery. Changing Tides is, at its core, more of Lone Sails, but bigger and better. Lone Sails saw you piloting an odd steampunk-looking wind-powered landship thing across a desolate post-apocalyptic landscape, picking up upgrades for your vehicle from various abandoned structures as you went. Changing Tides is that, but a boat. Same deal, but water. You start with nothing, just plopped into the water with frankly no context. You swim about a bit, quickly pick up a doobry that allows you to swim faster, and shortly thereafter stumble across this nautical steampunk contraption that you immediately take ownership of and begin to call home. There's only a tiny handful of mechanics that make everything go, in a delightfully minimalist kind of way, the sort of thing I really appreciated about Little Big Planet. Push a button and up pops the mast. Climb to the top of it, grab a rope, pull it down and tie it to a hook, and that's your sails unfurled. Pull a lever back and forth and you change the angle of the sails. A little flag moves up and down to indicate how much wind you're catching, and if you hit the sweet spot in the blue zone, you'll see wind swirls and a second sail pops out to let you know you're doing it right. Like the Okamotive before it, that's the land ship by the way, you'll take your new home on a journey across an apocalyptic landscape, but this time sunken beneath the water rather than the arid, scorched desert plains we saw before. Periodically you'll come across some kind of structure in your way, at which point you'll need to depart your ship, explore the place, and tinker with the mechanics until either the way opens up for you to proceed, or you get an upgrade to get around it, or both. In this way you'll slowly modify your ship with a bunch of stuff, all of which runs using the same basic mechanics as the sails. No tutorial is really necessary because for each new thing you'll learn the functionality through solving the puzzle that got you it in the first place. It's the same handful of elements, interacting with each other in new ways, and each new thing you learn to use sets you up perfectly for the next puzzle. It's a very slick bit of game design in this way. So you'll get an engine, which you can run by pushing buttons, jumping on stuff, and pulling levers and hoses around. All the stuff you learned when unfurling your sails. That engine then comes in pretty handy when you gain the ability to dive underwater and turn your boat into a submarine, which runs the same way, but now you're managing ballast as well to maintain your depth. Which segues me nicely into one of the core things that differentiates Changing Tides from Lone Sails, the vertical element. Before, you'd roll across the landscape, and you might have some hills or climb a building occasionally, but really it was a lot of going from left to right. Changing Tides adds a whole world beneath the surface. You can stop sailing at any time and dive down and see what's going on down there. My initial concern was that it was going to wind up a bit Echo the Dolphin, with all the stress and childhood trauma of drowning while exploring underwater caves, but your swim speed MacGuffin clearly comes with an air supply that makes this a non-issue. Even before you get this, one gets the impression that this kid has evolved gills like Kevin Costner, because no matter how long I stayed down, he never seemed to be any real kind of trouble. Matter of fact, I would genuinely say he never seemed to be in much trouble at all. Ever. Yeah, the path isn't easy, you're beset by storms and more natural disasters than one person really deserves to be involved in, but as dramatic as it gets, you just kind of know your ship's going to be sat waiting for you to carry on the journey, and you never get the sense of any real peril. I think that might put some folks off a bit. If you know the stakes are basically zero, it can detract from things somewhat. But on the other hand, I'm pretty okay with it. Not every game needs to be high stakes. It can just be about the journey. The vibes. It's a lot of good, chill, aquatic ambience, which is just the kind of thing I like. Aesthetically, it's a step up from Lone Sails too. While its predecessor was certainly not bad looking, Changing Tides is even more visually lovely. It keeps the slightly desaturated palette of the apocalypse and delivers beautiful watercolour-looking vistas of nature and fallen civilizations. This is then accompanied by a dynamic soundtrack that will change to fit your actions. There's also a couple of buttons you can press to pull the camera view out, so you can just perch on the front of your ship and let the wind carry you along and just soak in the ambience. It is just Lone Sails ++ at the end of the day. Bigger budget, fancier graphics, more dimensions of freedom. If you enjoyed the first, you'll like this. It's a bit longer too, clocking in at 5 to 6 hours. I thought Lone Sails was kind of the perfect length at 3-ish hours, but Changing Tides doesn't outstay its welcome either. Okay, so I said I'd mention the story. Obviously, here be spoilers, with the caveat that honestly there's not a huge amount to spoil, but feel free to duck out now if you don't want spoiling. I would say Lone Sails arguably did a better job with environmental storytelling. As you explored the abandoned and ruined structures, you learned about the desert world and how it ended up like that. You never got much context about your character, or her circumstances, or motivations. All you knew was that you needed to keep going right. And Changing Tides doesn't give you any more than that either, but somehow also tells you even less about the world. How did it end up submerged? I mean, you'd guess global warming, but it's never explicitly stated. You visit grandiose places of former power and get to speculate as to their purpose, but your speculation is all you get. You play with ancient steampunk mechanisms, but you only get an open door or new toy for your ship, never any enlightenment about the world. It feels like a missed opportunity, because it could be an interesting world for environmental storytelling, and it's just not utilised. And here's the kicker for me. This is the big plot point, and frankly only plot point, so you've been warned. They're the same world. I think you could probably kind of guess anyway, but it is the only thing made actually textually explicit in the game. So then you have this contradiction in that the parched land of dry seabeds where water is a precious scarce resource is coexistent with a land whose cities have been completely consumed by the waves. How did this come to be? I mean, I'm this far deep, so I'm going to spoil Lone Sails. My full playthrough is linked in the card up there in the top right. You've had 4 years to learn this. The desert was made because one guy figured out how to use water as a fuel source, so humanity, being the brain geniuses we are, used up all the water. So then why is there a continent sinking ocean in the same world where all the water was used up as fuel? Additionally, there's plenty of evidence of people adapting to these environments, but they've all disappeared somehow, except for our 2 child protagonists. Why? It's an unfortunate lingering frustration in what was otherwise a very solid and enjoyable experience. I do hope that if they wind up making, far distant skies or whatever, they can build up some of these details, because I do think there's a lot of potential there. One last point that definitely does impact some people's purchasing decisions, and so is worth touching on, is that the game uses de novo DRM. I can't personally weigh in on any impact that may have, as I played the Xbox version, which I don't believe does use the same DRM, but just to note that de novo can and does affect some people's game performance, and is definitely a deal breaker for some folks, so I feel it's worth highlighting. As I say, I did enjoy my time with Changing Tides, story pedantry aside, and in my professional gaming opinion, I'm more than happy to recommend it. It also launched on Xbox Game Pass, so if you're already subscribed to that, it's definitely something worth checking out. Otherwise, you can pick it up for £15 or your regional equivalent at your friendly local neighbourhood game retail platform. Thanks, as always, to my channel buccaneers, Weirto and Tolkus, for keeping this ship sailing. If you'd like to see your name in the credits in future videos with them, you can become a channel member by hitting the join button below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this review, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.